Well, good afternoon or good day. Chief here for CTT. Last week I talked about how we got a wonderful battalion commander in, and officers had to do a book report every month. Us warrant officers decided that we would do warrant officer training for an afternoon. We'd also proceed that by gathering as a group and going out to places around town to go eat. So we would combine lunch and then come back and have our instructions, and it was a good time to get together. Also, this battalion commander got a hold of the historian that was on Fort Sam Houston across town, and this individual took us all over the Texas area, locally around San Antonio, to all these obscure and out of the way places where minor engagements took place throughout the history of Texas, but a lot of them were involving the Texans and the Native Americans. And some of these sites we went to, you're just like, okay, we're out here in the middle of nowhere. They just happened to be riding by. That's probably what it was. So a lot of these engagements were probably just happenstance. You know, it's like the Native Americans were like probably looking at maybe a handful of cowboys or Texans and saying, hey, we can get some free weapons if we take these guys out. Because I imagine that's how they got the greater share of their weapons, at least according to Hollywood, you know. But at the same time, the battalion commander was also having individual officers do a little vignette or a little speech on the weapons and other aspects of that lifestyle. Not every time. I think I had to talk about one of the Colt pistols or revolvers. I should say revolver, since these were all revolvers back then. I had to talk on one of the Colt revolvers, and I didn't have one, so to speak. This historian also had weapons from that replicas of that time period, and we went to a range one day, just not very far from where I live, here in San Antonio, and we just went out there for the day, and he showed us how to load weapons and everything else. And you sit there and you ponder, because, you know, in the Western movies, you know, you see the cowboys, and they're mostly using their 6-shooters, and they're shooting their 6-shooters, you know, at a distance. You know, it's like bam, 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 bam. And of course, they got the Hollywood gun where it just keeps on going. Meanwhile, the greater share of these weapons were 5-shot or 6-shot, depending on the make and the model of the pistol. Years ago, when I was in college, and back when you could bring weapons on school and nobody would complain on campus, we had a fellow student. I was doing a military history class, and one of my fellow students, he brought in a musket and a pistol. Not a pistol, a revolver. I got so used to saying pistol in the military. But brought in a revolver, and he did the little scenario up front, you know, okay, I've got my musket, I shoot the long distance shot, 1-shot deal, but the Indians are getting closer and closer, as he put it. He did call them Indians, so I will call them Indians. So he says, okay, I whip out my pistol, you know, bang 1, bang 2, bang 3, bang 4, bang 5, bang 6. He says, now I'm out of bullets, and the Indians are still coming. And then he demonstrated how you had to reload the musket, and also how to reload the revolver. And the revolver, 6 chambers, 5 chambers, you got to reload them one at a time, because part of the pistol breaks away, and it helps you push and make a good seal for your powder and your ball and everything else, but that takes time. And then, like I said, here we are out in the middle of nowhere, and generally people would have an additional chamber or cylinder, so they could shoot the 6 shots, break the weapon in half, so to speak. They could pull out the cylinder and throw the other one on there, and they'd have 6 additional shots. There again, okay, you're up to 13 shots, 14 shots, depending on how many rifles you had, and you're out of bullets again. But the historian basically said, you know, one guy would shoot while the other guy would reload. The cowboys would try to work in pairs, and we even got to the point where we went down to the Alamo. We ate a lunch. We watched the latest Alamo movie that came out, and then we went down, and then of course we had the historian from the Alamo take us all around the Alamo, and my fellow warrant officers are getting upset with me because I kept asking questions and found out a lot. But the historian basically said back then, knowing the fact that bang, you're out of bullet, bang, you're out of bullet, bang, you're out of bullet, depending on how many muskets and 6 shooters or 5 shooters you have, he said back then a lot of Texans had like 2 to 3 rifles, or rifle plus a shotgun. So he said at the Battle of the Alamo, he says probably everybody there probably had 2 to 3 weapons, so they could, you know, shoot, and then again you're out of bullets and you got to reload. But this time, instead of American Indians, you got the Mexicans coming over the wall. So it was interesting, and a couple sites we went to are actually here inside of San Antonio. One was on the far east of town, but within the city limits, and he was irate that day because I can't remember what incident happened there, but I think it was related to the Alamo, which is downtown San Antonio, and they were building, I don't know if it was commercial or residential, and he was just so upset. He says, we tried to get money to build a park and at least put up a sign saying, you know, such on such and such date back in Texas history, a battle happened here. And he was, I don't blame him for being upset. You know, we got to preserve our history. Good, bad, or indifferent. History repeats itself. But if you don't know history, how do you know when you repeat yourself? A little political there, I'm sorry. But I get upset when we're taking down Confederate statues and everything else. We did that to honor them. We didn't do that to shame them or to praise them. We did that to honor them. Sorry, went political again. And then another place we went to was kind of towards in between downtown and this other action. And it's still there, but there was no sign. At least I didn't see any. And we drove to this parking lot, and there's this slope that went down to what we here in Texas and out west call, excuse me, gotta get a drink, what we call creeks. Now I think back east you call them streams or springs. Don't know why it's not the same across the country, but it isn't. I'm used to calling everything a creek, not a stream, not a spring. Okay. But this had cut a good sized rut in the ground, and it wasn't straight, but it was like a mini trench line, so to speak. And I think there was like 40 to 50 Texans that were inside looking up this nice slope. I mean, it was a nice gentle slope, and the Mexican cavalry, of course, came charging down it. And so here you are, standing, maybe exposing this part of your body, not much, shooting your weapon and knocking some Mexican cavalry off their horse. And so it's more of a skirmish because the person in charge of the Mexican cavalry realized, yeah, I'm not going to take these guys out. They're going to kill most of my men before I can get into that. Because they valued their horses. This wasn't a Hollywood scene, so therefore they weren't going to charge and break legs of horses to entrap these guys inside this stream. So it was a good time. We had lots of fun. It was nice to learn some of the local stuff about Texas. And like I said, you know, you would go out to these places and you're like, why here? I mean, because even one place was like, I thought when we stopped, because it was a cut in a ridge line where a modern day road was going through, but according to the historian, this cut had been here for a long time, either by nature or something else. A cut in this ridgeline, and some minor engagement even happened in that. And he said, well, of course the Texans won because Texans would write the history books, not the Indians or not the Native Americans. Not saying that they don't maintain a good culture, but they don't write history books. The survivors do. And of course, a lot of these battles weren't always one-sided, because sometimes we would hear, like maybe half the Texans were dead or wounded or maybe even carried off, because sometimes that happened. And of course, the places we went, you're kind of thinking how many more engagements maybe happened in this area where maybe the Texans didn't win. So therefore, you don't hear about those minor engagements. So I really don't know what else to, what this, boy, repeating myself. I used to do that when I was younger. I really don't know what else I can talk about, because due to the nature of my job, I just can't sit there and tell you what I did. I did good things as far as I was concerned in the military. I do get promoted here. I can talk about that next week, and probably maybe even tie up Fort Sam, or not Fort Sam, but Medina area. And, there's not much I can talk about. I get a little upset when people ask me what I did. And it's like, well, when I first joined the military, I couldn't talk about something that I learned until 25 years into the future. Well, about 5, maybe even 10 years into my career, between that time frame, it became, you can't talk about it for life. You can talk about it when you're dead. So, if you got a question, what I did, can't tell you exactly. Sometimes I can't even talk around it, some of the places that I am. I have left stuff out of a lot of videos. I will talk about them later on, but I will not associate where I was at the time to a lot of that stuff, so I don't say the wrong thing at the wrong place or time on my site. So, rambling on, this is Chief. Remember, freedom's not free. Everything looks nice and hopeful in Ukraine. I'm sorry they're getting their infrastructure bombed, but Putin's a jerk. What can I say? Chief out. Freedom's not free.